and welcome to this edition of News on the Hour. I'm Rukma with you, and over the next 60 minutes, we'll be taking you through all the stories developing since this morning across India and the world. We'll be telling you about how the Prime Minister will be attending the 16th East Asia Summit. It's the premier leaders-led summit in the world. Also, we'll be taking you through what the Union Defence Minister is the top issues that he is likely to touch upon as he addresses the dialogue on the Indo-Pacific regional dialogue, which is to have great ramifications of great significance in relations in the area for strategic issues to be discussed in this entire very crucial area. Also, all the COVID updates, developments on the vaccine front, as well as even as COP26 approaches, climate change becomes a major issue. All that and more over the next 1 hour, but first the headlines. Prime Minister Narendra Modi to attend 16th East Asia Summit today via video conferencing. India is a founding member of the Premier Leaders-led Forum in the Indo-Pacific. Raksha Mantri Rajnath Singh to virtually address Indo-Pacific regional dialogue today. This year's IPRD will focus on the broad theme of evolution in maritime strategy during the 21st century. WHO Technical Advisory Group asks for additional clarifications from Bharat Biotech for final emergency use listing risk-benefit assessment for global use of Covaxin. WHO chief scientist says the TAG will reconvene for final assessment on 3rd November. India's cumulative vaccination coverage crosses 103 crore mark, more than 55 lakh vaccine doses administered in past 24 hours. Union Health Minister Mansukh Mandavia to interact with health ministers of all states today. United Nations newly released emission gap report sends another stark warning about raising global temperatures. Report says planet is on track for an average 2.7 degrees Celsius temperature rise this century, despite current global climate pledges. Sudan's Armed Forces Chief defends military's seizure of power, says the government was ousted to avoid civil war. Meanwhile, protesters take to the streets to demonstrate against the takeover. In T20 World Cup Super 12 round, South Africa defeat West Indies for 8 wickets, whereas Pakistan registers second win, defeating New Zealand by 5 wickets, England to face Bangladesh, and Scotland to take on Namibia in today's matches. Hello and welcome. Once again in our top story, Prime Minister Narendra Modi will today attend the 16th East Asia Summit virtually. Matters of regional and international interest will be discussed at the summit. Concerns on maritime security and terrorism will also be taken up during it. Leaders are also expected to accept declarations on mental health, economic recovery through tourism and green recovery, which are being co-sponsored by India. The East Asia Summit is the premier leaders-led forum in the Indo-Pacific. Since its inception in 2005, it has played a significant role in the strategic and geopolitical evolution of East Asia. Apart from the 10 ASEAN member states, East Asia Summit also includes India, China, Japan, the Republic of Korea, Australia, New Zealand, the United States, and Russia. India, being a founding member of the East Asia Summit, is committed to strengthening the East Asia Summit and making it more effective for dealing with contemporary challenges. It is also an important platform for furthering practical cooperation in the region by building upon the convergence between ASEAN Outlook on India-Pacific (AOIP) and Indo-Pacific Ocean Initiative, IPOI. Joining us now on the phone line is our correspondent Arun Sharma, who's covering this story. Arun, well, a very important and a significant summit, the East Asia Summit that the Prime Minister will be attending virtually today. When we talk about the Premier Leaders-led forum that's meeting again in a post-pandemic scenario, there are many issues that each of these countries that are member states are dealing with as a result of what went on due to COVID in particular for the past 2 years.
Absolutely, Rukma. So leaders will discuss primarily the matters of regional and international including, about American security, terrorism. But the important subject and the most wide subject that will be, dominating this entire East Asia Summit will be COVID-19 cooperation. Now, it is also important to note that the leaders under this East Asia Summit will also be, accepting the declarations on mental health, economic recovery through tourism, and green recovery. Now, all these three declarations are being co-sponsored by India. So, this also gives an important aspect to it that, as far as mental health is concerned, and of course, economic recovery through tourism and green recovery. So, this is some of the important topics that will be dominating the East Asia Summit. Now, we know this fact that on various multilateral platforms, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has focused on the fact that how can COVID-19 cooperation can be strengthened further. And when we spoke about last time, recently when Quad meeting was held in USA, over there also, India's COVID-19 vaccination drive was appreciated globally and in the Quad meeting as well. So now when in the East Asia Summit, when Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be addressing also, his focus will completely be on the fact as to how can a better coordinated efforts can be done as far as COVID-19 vaccination drive is concerned and as far as fight against COVID-19 pandemic is concerned. So in that aspect, various subsets are there that will be discussed. Second is that how can economic recovery can take place in this post-COVID pandemic time? How can free movement of tourists, the professionals who are working in these East Asia summits for the East or in these member countries are concerned? How can there be free movement? How can there be less restrictions as far as the traveling is concerned so that economic recovery can take place via tourism? So that's an important aspect. Last but not the least, it's about green initiative or the green recovery or primarily the climate change. We know this fact that the entire world is combating and trying to combat the climate change, and India has been at the forefront as far as the fight against climate change is concerned. So as far as climate change is concerned, controlling the climate change, India is already taking a leadership role as far as International Solar Alliance is concerned, as far as abiding by its carbon footprint or controlling the carbon emissions are concerned by 2030. And India is a developing country which is playing a leadership role just like a developed country as far as controlling the climate change is concerned. So in all these aspects, primarily Prime Minister Narendra Modi's intervention, Prime Minister Narendra Modi's address, Prime Minister Narendra Modi's presence in this East Asia Summit Forum is going to be very much crucial as far as COVID-19 is concerned, as far as economic recovery is concerned, as far as climate change is concerned.
And India also, as a founding member, is very keen that the East Asia Summit should strengthen further. In that sense, what are the challenges that India has had to face over the years in ensuring that the East Asia Summit, of which India is a founding member, maintains its stature and in fact increases its clout in the region in order to ensure peace and stability?
Well, absolutely. So, it is very much significant platform primarily for, boosting the practical cooperation in the Indo-Pacific, by building upon the convergence between ASEAN outlook on Indo-Pacific and, of course, the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative. So, these are important aspects. We know this fact that India's stance has been very much clear, and earlier also India has collaborated and coordinated with the like-minded democracies on the Indo-Pacific front. And India stands very much clear on the aspect of how can a free, fair, transparent, inclusive, secure, safe Indo-Pacific can be created. It is very much important to note that the like-minded democracies have already also come forward So under this ambit of East Asia Summit or the ASEAN Summit primarily, or Indo-ASEAN Summit primarily, strengthening the Indo-Pacific is going to be very much crucial. How to build capacities, how to share the resources of the Indo-Pacific is concerned, how can all the stakeholders of the Indo-Pacific can come forward, can create safe and secure Indo-Pacific. That is something also likely to dominate on this table, because Prime Minister Narendra Modi is early also on various multilateral platforms has been very vocal about free and secure and inclusive Indo-Pacific in that context. And apart from COVID-19, economic recovery, and of course green initiative of the climate change primarily, Indo-Pacific is going to dominate. And yes, other subsets like countering terrorism, combating terrorism is also likely to dominate this table of East Asia Summit as well, and of course the ASEAN India Summit as well. So today is an important meet as far as the East Asia Summit is concerned, whether all these topics are likely to dominate, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi is going to be participating in this East Asia Summit.
Well, many thanks, Arun, for joining us there for those detailed inputs. You keep your eyes on that story. We'll be back with you throughout the day for more. And in other news, Defence Minister Rajnath Singh will today deliver the keynote address at the Indo-Pacific Regional Dialogue 2021. The 3-day-long Indo-Pacific Regional Dialogue, the APEX International Annual Conference of the Indian Navy, will begin virtually today. The dialogue is being held every year since 2018. This year's IPRD will focus on 8 specific sub-themes under the broad theme of evolution in maritime strategy during the 21st century, imperatives, challenges, and the way ahead. The Defence Minister will reiterate India's policy of a free and open Indo-Pacific under a rules-based order. He is also likely to expound on PM Modi's Sagar initiative, Vaccine Maitri carried out by India for littoral nations, and India's assistance to neighbours in the Indian Ocean. He is also likely to flag challenges and threats like piracy, poaching, and sea pollution in his address. And moving on now to our COVID-19 vaccination coverage numbers. We have crossed the 103 crore landmark milestone. Over 103 crore 53 lakh vaccine doses have been administered across India so far. More than 55.89 lakh vaccine doses have been administered in the past 24 hours. And an update now on the COVID situation across the country. The recovery of 14,021 patients in the last 24 hours has increased the cumulative tally of recovered patients to 3 crore 35 lakh 97,339. Consequently, India's recovery rate now stands at 98.19%. The recovery rate is currently at its highest peak since March 2020. Sustained and collaborative efforts by the centre and the states or union territories continues the trend of less than 50,000 daily new cases being reported for 122 consecutive days now. 13,451 new cases were reported in the past 24 hours. The active caseload remains below the 2 lakh mark and is presently at 1,62,661, which is the lowest in 242 days. Active cases presently constitute 0.48% of total positive cases, the lowest since March 2020. The testing capacity across India continues to expand. The last 24 hours saw a total of 13,05,962 tests being conducted, and so far we have conducted over 60 crore 32 lakh tests. While testing capacity has been enhanced across the country, weekly positivity rate at 1.22% remains less than 2% for the last 33 days now. The daily positivity rate is reported to be 1.03%, below 2% for the past 23 days and below 3% for 58 consecutive days now. Union Health Minister Mansukh Mandavia will hold a meeting with health ministers of states and union territories regarding ramping up of the COVID-19 vaccination drive. The Union Health Minister will also discuss with the health ministers about PM Ayushman Bharat Health Infrastructure Mission during the meet. Meanwhile, the centre has urged states and union territories to focus on beneficiaries who are waiting for their second dose of COVID-19 vaccine after the interval period is over. The states and union territories have been urged to improve the momentum of vaccination and accelerate its coverage as India moves forward to vaccinate with the target of vaccinating the entire eligible population by the end of the year. We have covered 76% of eligible population for the first dose. And theatres across Kerala are set to reopen today. No Time to Die, the latest in the James Bond series, will be the first movie to be released, though the state government has given a nod to the reopening of cinemas since October 25, 2021. Theatre owners have confirmed that screenings will begin only from today. As per the latest guidelines, the state government has granted permission for the reopening of cinema halls and indoor auditoriums with only 50% occupancy now. Entry to cinemas will be allowed only to those who have taken 2 doses of the vaccine. The World Health Organization's Technical Advisory Group on Tuesday sought additional clarifications from Bharat Biotech for its COVID-19 vaccine Covaxin to conduct a final risk-benefit assessment for emergency use listing of the vaccine. The Technical Advisory Group will now meet on the 3rd of November for a final assessment. The Technical Advisory Group for Emergency Use Listing is an independent advisory group that provides recommendations to WHO on whether a COVID-19 vaccine can be listed for emergency use under the EUL procedure. Bharat Biotech has been submitting data to WHO on a rolling basis and additional information too at the UN Health Body's requests on September 27th. The first India-Kyrgyzstan dialogue between the National Security Council's secretariats was held on Tuesday in New Delhi. The Indian side was led by National Security Advisor Ajit Doval and the Kyrgyz side was led by Secretary of Security Council of Kyrgyzstan, Lieutenant General Marat Imankulov. The two sides held discussions on threats and challenges facing both countries as well as the regional security environment with special reference to Afghanistan. The two sides welcomed a similarity of views on these matters and agreed upon steps to enhance bilateral security cooperation between the relevant bodies, including in the fields of counter-terrorism, combating radicalization, narcotics control and defense cooperation. The Indian Army is celebrating its 75th Infantry Day today. On the occasion, Chief of Defence Staff General Bipin Rawat, along with Indian Army Chief General M.M. Narwane, laid a wreath at the National War Memorial in the national capital. Infantry Day is observed as a remembrance of the first military event of independent India, when the Indian Army repelled the first attack on Indian soil on the 27th of October 1947 in the Kashmir Valley. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh greeted and extended warm wishes to brave infantrymen of the country on Infantry Day. In a tweet, he said, "Infantrymen are the epitome of unwavering courage and valor." He said the nation salutes their service and sacrifice while serving the country. The Indian Railways has made special arrangements in the ongoing festive season for passengers travelling to their homes to celebrate festivals with their families. For the convenience of rail travellers and to clear extra rush of passengers during this season, the Railways is running 668 trips of 110 special trains. from Durga Puja celebrations till Chhat Puja this year. The Railway Ministry has said augmentation of coaches in regular trains is being undertaken to ensure berth availability during the festive rush. Crowd controlling measures are also being undertaken with the supervision of Railway Protection Force staff. Additional RPF personnel have been deployed in major stations to ensure security of passengers. And officers are deployed on emergency duty at major stations to ensure smooth running of trains. Staff has been deployed in various sections to attend any disruption of train service on priority. Moving on, the Bombay High Court will today resume hearing in the bail plea of Aryan Khan in the cruise drug bust case. The High Court on Tuesday heard the bail applications of the accused in the cruise ship drug bust issue. Senior advocate Mukul Rohatgi represented Aryan Khan, son of Bollywood superstar Shah Rukh Khan. Aryan had moved the High Court after both magistrate and sessions courts rejected his plea. Aryan and others accused were arrested after the NCP raided a rave party on a ship headed to Goa from Mumbai on the 2nd of October. 14 people were taken into custody, among whom 8 have been arrested. In another development, a 5-member team of the Narcotics Control Bureau will question Mumbai Zonal Director Sameer Wankhede in connection with allegations of extortion levelled against him. Wankhede had filed an affidavit in the Mumbai Special Court stating that all the allegations are baseless and misleading with the intention of hampering the ongoing investigation. And Yogesh Sheetal joins us from Mumbai with more. Yogesh, give us the latest about the Aryan Khan case. The situation seems to be critical at this point.
Good morning, you're writing this argument to be the Bombay High Court that the argument with the message as well as in
the same argument when it comes to consumption in possession. The both points that were raised also in the Bombay High Court by the former Attorney General of India, Mukul Rohatgi, who have in fact joined the legal team of Aryan Khan. So today we may expect the NCB's response to the argument, the counter argument basically, but meanwhile we may also expect arguments from other accused today later on. As far as important arguments and points are concerned from Mukul Rohatgi, he has highlighted 3 things. The first that I have already told you, that consumption and possession is one of the part that the defense has been relying since the day one. Second, he has said that the legislative intent behind the NDPS Act is to treat the youngsters basically as a victim of drug menace, not as an offender or as an accused in this case, and that's the reason why the punishment was also reduced later on. Apart from that, as far as WhatsApp chats are concerned, that is one of the major arguments from the NCB so far. Basically the defense side, the Aryan Khan side, they are saying that as far as WhatsApp chats are concerned, these chats belong to 2018 and has no mention of the drug cruise party, so it cannot be related. Apart from these arguments, also other arguments were advanced from the defense. One also important thing I must tell you at this point in time is that basically Aryan Khan's lawyer has said that if any position is there with the accused number 2, that is Arbal Merchant, then it cannot be treated as an offense by Aryan Khan, because he has no liability, he has nothing to do with what his friends is carrying on. So that is also one of the important arguments, because he has said that he may be knowing the other accused, but it doesn't mean that the offenses allegedly committed by other accused can be linked to Aryan Khan also. So these are the basic arguments that were advanced by the defense side yesterday, and we may expect today that arguments may be continuing. Meanwhile, we may also expect that NCB is going to counter these arguments of defense today later on. Yeah, Rukma.
Well, Yogesh, also when we talk about the Sameer Wankhede case, where does the case stand now? What is Sameer Wankhede saying in his defense? Yogesh, if you can
See,
hear.
there are multiple developments on that front. The first development, recently we had seen that. Yeah, Rukma, I am responding to your question.
Right.
See, Samir Wankhede had filed affidavit in the Sessions Court recently, and he said that how some people are trying to scuttle the investigation, leveling baseless allegations, and also he has emphatically said that he is ready for any inquiry. So now on this front, we may expect that an inquiry can be initiated from the NCB. However, there is not official statement as of now. There are multiple reports, and reports need to be verified first. Apart from that, also a PIL has been filed by one of the advocates. They have said they have requested the court. They made a prayer before the court to direct the minister not to make such a statement. So a PIL has been moved in the Bombay High Court. We may expect that High Court may issue some directions if it seems the case is fit for that. So there are multiple fronts, legal front as well as out of the court front. So these are the developments on that front so far.
Right, Yogesh, where you keep your eyes on that story. So two separate parallel stories developing there. Many thanks for joining us and for those inputs. And well, it's time now for a short break. We'll be right back, but on the other side, there's more news and updates. So do stay tuned. Keep watching DD India.
As the day unfolds and news and events take shape, we get you complete coverage of every news breaking in, tracking new developments as they happen. Midday Prime English, Monday to Friday, 2 p.m. on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching News on the Hour, and just a few days before COP26 opens in Glasgow, another scientific report on climate change is another thundering wake-up call. According to the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres' UN Emissions Gap Report of the United Nations, current commitments to cut greenhouse gas emissions have put the planet on track for an average 2.7 degrees Celsius temperature rise this century. The report finds that when added together, the plans cut greenhouse gas emissions in 2030 by around 7.5% compared to the previous pledges made 5 years ago. UN Chief Antonio Guterres has said that the governments will be in the spotlight at the COP26 conference next week to meet a deadline of this year to commit to more ambitious cut pledges in what could be the last chance to put the world on track to limiting warming to below 2 degrees Celsius, above pre-industrial levels, and ideally to 1.5 degrees Celsius.
Less than 1 week before COP26 in Glasgow, we are still on track for climate catastrophe, even with the last announcements that were made. The 2021 Emissions Gap Report shows that with the present nationally determined contributions and other firm commitments of countries around the world, we are indeed on track for a catastrophic global temperature rise of around 2.7 degrees Celsius. Now, even if the announcements of the last few days will materialize, we would still be on track to clearly more than 2 degrees Celsius.
According to authors of the report, the current pledges would see the world warmer by 2.7 degrees Celsius this century, a scenario that Guterres has called a climate catastrophe.
The clock is ticking. The emissions gap is the result of a leadership gap, but leaders can still make this a turning point to the inner future instead of a tipping point to climate catastrophe. The era of measures and dollar promises must end. The time for closing this leadership gap must begin in Glasgow.
President of the UN General Assembly, Abdullah Shahid, opened a high-level meeting on climate action at the UN General Assembly. In his opening statement, he underlined the need to work together in order to conserve environment and urged several stakeholders in fastening their response towards climate action.
I felt it was important, even in my presidency of hope, to open the meeting with blunt realities. My hope, after all, is not rooted in blind optimism or in diminishing the gravity of the situation. My hope derives from an honest assessment of the challenges before us and on an understanding that we have the combined capacity to confront those challenges if we work together.
Britain's Queen Elizabeth will not attend the COP26 summit in Glasgow next week as she has been advised rest. According to Buckingham Palace, the Queen has been undertaking light duties at Windsor Castle already. However, she will be delivering an address to the assembled delegates via a recorded message. The 95-year-old, the world's oldest and longest reigning monarch, stayed overnight in hospital last Wednesday after undergoing preliminary investigations for an unspecified but not COVID-related ailment. An update on the Sudan situation. Sudan's top general Abdel Fattah al-Burhan has said that the military has agreed to a number of initiatives suggested by Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok, but civilian forces have refused to engage in any dialogue. Speaking at his first news conference since he announced Monday's takeover, Burhan defended the army's seizure of power, saying he had ousted the government of Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok to avoid civil war. Burhan accused politicians of incitement against the armed forces as cabinet ministers had attended demonstrations last week to protest against the prospect of a military takeover. He said the army had no choice but to sideline politicians who were inciting against the armed forces. He said the military's action did not amount to a coup. Burhan says he was keeping ousted Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok at his own house and had not been harmed, being brought to Burhan's own home for his safety.
The Prime Minister was in his house. However, we were afraid that he'll be in danger, so he has been placed with me at my home. He is living his life very normally, and when things calm down, he can go back home. So he is with me at home and not anywhere else. Yesterday I was with him and many others were with him. He has not been kidnapped or attacked. He is at home, and once the threat is over, he'll return home. We still hope that he will still be with us, with the Sudanese people, with the transition, and will continue to support it when he sees at the end of the transitional period and there is a result.
The Sudanese Prime Minister, along with other members of his cabinet, was arrested on Monday after a military takeover. Western nations have denounced the coup, calling for the detained cabinet ministers to be freed and saying they will cut off aid if the military does not restore power sharing with civilians. White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan on Tuesday said the United States has sent a clear message to the military in Sudan that it should first and foremost cease any violence against innocent civilians, that it should release those who have been detained, and they should get back on a democratic path. The Biden administration is looking at a full range of economic tools to respond to the military takeover in Sudan and has been in close touch with Gulf countries.
We are pressing pause on significant aspects of our economic assistance to Sudan, and we will look at the full range of economic tools available to us in coordination and consultation with regional actors and other key countries to make sure that we are trying to push the entire Sudanese political process back in a positive direction after this significant and alarming setback.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken spoke to Hamdok on Tuesday. Blinken has welcomed Prime Minister Abdullah's release from custody and reiterated a call for the Sudanese military to release all civilian leaders in detention. Meanwhile, Sudanese protesters built burning barricades on Tuesday night as they took to the streets for a second day in protest against the military takeover. Monday's military takeover brought a halt to Sudan's transition to democracy 2 years after a popular uprising toppled long-ruling Islamist autocrat Omar al-Bashir. Demonstrators on the streets of Khartoum blocked roads in protest. On Tuesday evening, the Sudanese Professionals Association group of trade unions said it had reports of retaliatory attacks by coup forces on protesters gathering sites in the capital Khartoum and other cities. They say that the coup forces used bullets and attempts were made to break through barricades. And let's take a look at COVID-19 figures from across the world. So far, more than 24 crore 52 lakh people have contracted COVID-19, while the number of recoveries stand at above 22 crore 23 lakh globally. The virus has claimed over 49 lakh 78,000 lives worldwide. The US continues to remain the worst affected, where the number of cases have crossed 4 crore 64 lakh, while the death toll remains above 7 lakh 59,000. An expert panel on Tuesday voted overwhelmingly to recommend the US Food and Drug Administration authorize Pfizer Inc. and BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine for children aged 5 to 11, citing that the benefits of the shot outweigh the risks. An authorization for that age group would be an important regulatory step towards reaching out to 28 million children for inoculation, since most of them are back in school for in-person learning. The vaccine could be available to the younger age group as soon as next week. The FDA is not obligated to follow the advice of its outside experts, but usually does. The vote was 17 in favor with 1 abstention. If the FDA authorizes the shots for this age group, an advisory panel to the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention will meet next week to make a recommendation on the administration of the vaccine. Only a few other countries, including China, Cuba, and the United Arab Emirates, have so far cleared COVID-19 vaccines for children in this age group and younger. A Senate committee in Brazil has voted to recommend that President Jair Bolsonaro face charges over his handling of the COVID pandemic. 7 of the panel's 11 members backed a report calling for 9 charges to be filed against Bolsonaro, including crimes against humanity. The vote concludes a 6-month inquiry which has revealed scandals and corruption inside Brazil's government. The committee chair, Senator Omar Aziz, will send these findings to Brazil's Prosecutor General today. Bolsonaro has, however, maintained he is guilty of absolutely nothing. More than 6 lakh people in Brazil are confirmed to have died from COVID, second only to the COVID death toll in the United States. Cuba will open its borders to ease entry requirements next month, signaling that a 2-year pandemic pall is lifting from the Caribbean island as it vaccinates the entire population with its own COVID-19 drugs. As of November 15, travelers over 12 will only have to carry proof of vaccination or a recent PCR test to enter the country, replacing perhaps the strictest protocols in the Caribbean. The protocol, along with the US ban on most travel to the communist-run island nation next door, has left tourism well behind competitors in the area, such as the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, the Bahamas and Cancun. COVID-19 cases and deaths have fallen 80% since the vaccination drive began in the middle of one of the world's worst Delta surges this summer, with more than 65% of the population immunized and 90% having received at least one dose of the 3-dose treatment. In some more international news, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on Tuesday carried out a major cabinet reshuffle, putting longtime Green activist Stephen Guilbeault into the environment portfolio, as he pledged that Canada would do big things. Trudeau also appointed new ministers of Defence and Foreign Affairs and pledged to continue to work on reconciliation with Indigenous people. Trudeau has said addressing climate change is a major priority. His government has already imposed a carbon tax, saying it will curb harmful emissions in the energy sector. Trudeau, who assumed power in 2015, won a third term last month, but had to act after he lost 3 ministers and another quit before the election. Fewer than 10 of the 38 ministers kept their existing positions. Also, Melanie Joly becomes Canada's 5th foreign minister under Trudeau, and Anita Anand takes over defense. US President Joe Biden told a virtual summit of the ASEAN that his country plans to spend more than $100 million to expand its strategic partnership with the 10-member bloc. Biden's participation in the virtual summit was the first in 4 years that Washington has engaged at a top level with a grouping that it sees as key to countering an increasingly assertive China. The $102 million fund is expected to go towards health, climate, economic and educational programs. Speaking at the summit, Biden said Southeast Asian leaders can expect him to personally show up to deepen the United States' cooperation and pursue new avenues for dialogue in the region. He also voiced grave concerns over the violence in Myanmar and called on Myanmar's military to release people who have been unjustly detained. Germany's outgoing Chancellor Angela Merkel on Tuesday received her discharge papers from President Frank-Walter Steinmeier, relegating her to a caretaker role after 16 years at the country's helm. Merkel, who watched from a visitor's gallery earlier in the day as a new, more diverse and younger parliament elected a woman from the centre-left Social Democrats as parliamentary president, will now be acting chancellor until a new government is formed. The SPD, who finished first in September's election, are in talks to form a coalition government with the Greens and the pro-business Free Democrats by December 6th that would oust Merkel's Conservatives after 4 terms. Germany elected a new Bundestag, the 20th in its post-war federal history, in a national election on the 26th of September. Chilean police evacuated people from a fire that affected 10 homes, vehicles and a warehouse in the Carahue commune in southern Chile on Monday afternoon. According to police reports, they evacuated 13 people, including elderly adults, women and children. The south-central Araucania region has long been convulsed by a simmering conflict between the indigenous Mapuche and the Chilean government. According to local authorities, it all happened minutes after armed and hooded men burned the Casablanca camp and forestry task. No injuries or fatalities were reported. The Araucania, where the Mapuche population is concentrated, has one of the highest poverty rates in Chile. The Mapuche indigenous group has long-standing disputes with companies in the area, mainly forestry, and the state in demand for restitution of ancestral territorial rights. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison on Wednesday said unvaccinated tennis players would be allowed to enter the country to play at the Australian Open in January if they underwent a mandatory 2-week COVID-19 quarantine. Morrison's comments contradicted those of his Immigration Minister Alex Hawke, who said last week that tennis players and other athletes would have to be double vaccinated to enter the country. The Prime Minister's statement is good news for Tennis Australia, who wants Serbia's world number 1, Novak Djokovic, and other top players whose vaccination status is unclear to be able to compete at the Grand Slam. The state of Victoria, where the Melbourne Park venue of the tournament is situated, will almost certainly enforce the quarantine regulations to the strictest extent. Victoria's Premier Daniel Andrews is vehemently opposed to letting unvaccinated people into the country, but said on Tuesday the state would manage the risk if the federal government decided to allow it. It's time now for a short break here on News on the Hour, but there's more up ahead. So stay tuned and keep watching DD India.
Namaste India.
Namaste land.
Marhaban ila al-Hind. Zari India. Salam India. Namaste India.
Namaskar Bharata.
Nous sommes
l'Inde.
نحن هنود India.
माँ हिंदी हस्ती
हम हिंदियानी.
सलाम हिंदुस्तान.
We are India.
Your window to rising India. India's voice on global platforms. Latest news from India and around the world. In-depth analysis of global headlines. Watch DD India in your country. Available for downlink in all Southeast Asian countries. STTV broadcast is available through the satellite GSAT 17 at 93.5 degrees east. HDTV broadcast is available through the satellite GSAT 10 at 83 degrees east. For technical details, scan here. Switch to DD India now.
Welcome back after the break. You're watching News on the Hour here on DD India. In other news, an executive at social media app TikTok, owned by Beijing-based ByteDance, denied during a US congressional hearing on Tuesday that it has given information to the Chinese government, saying it has taken steps to safeguard US data. Senator Marsha Blackburn, the top Republican on the Senate Commerce Committee, held a hearing. Said she is concerned about TikTok's data collection, including audio and a user's location, and the potential for the Chinese government to gain access to the information. Blackburn pressed Michael Beckerman, TikTok's head of public policy for the Americas, on whether the company could resist giving data to China's government if material were to be demanded. Blackburn said that China's government has a financial stake in ByteDance and a seat on the board, which Beckerman denied. Beckerman also says that outside researchers have found that TikTok has collected less data on users than its tech industry peers. Former US President Donald Trump had sought to bar TikTok from US app stores, saying it collected data from American users, but later President Joe Biden revoked Trump's plan. US stock indices closed modestly higher on Tuesday. with the Dow Industrials and S&P 500 hitting fresh records. The gains were subdued as Facebook shares fell in the wake of its quarterly earnings. Facebook was the biggest drag on the S&P 500 and Nasdaq after the company warned that Apple's new privacy changes would weigh on its digital business. The S&P 500 gained 0.18%, while the Nasdaq Composite gained 0.06%. The Dow Jones Industrial Average also slightly rose by 0.044%. Domestic equity market benchmarks BSE Sensex and Nifty 50 were trading flat with a positive bias this morning. BSE Sensex was hovering around 61,400 and NSE Nifty was ruling at 18,293, giving up 18,300 levels. Asian markets opened in the red as the bout of profit booking overnight in the US rubbed off on markets here. In early trade, MSCI's index of Asia Pacific shares outside Japan were down by 0.69%. The Japanese Nikkei was trading lower by nearly 200 points in early trade, while the Hang Seng was the main loser, trading lower by over 450 points as Chinese stocks saw profit booking. Oil prices fell today after industry data showed crude oil stockpiles rising more than expected and fuel inventories unexpectedly increasing last week in the US, the world's largest oil consumer. Brent oil futures fell 25 cents or 0.3% to $86.15 a barrel after closing at the highest in 7 years on Tuesday. West Texas Intermediate futures declined 26 cents or 0.3% to $84.39 a barrel after gaining 1.1% in the previous session. And now on to sports. South Africa cruised to an 8-wicket victory against the West Indies to register its first win in the T20 this year. After restricting the Windies to 143 for the loss of 8 wickets, the Proteas chased down the target with 10 balls remaining. Aiden Markram remained unbeaten on 51, with Rassie van der Dusen making an important contribution with an unbeaten 43. Reza Hendricks, who replaced Quinton de Kock in the lineup, scored a brisk 39. Earlier, Evan Lewis was the only positive as the West Indies batting lineup failed to step up for a second successive game. Wicketkeeper Quinton de Kock made himself match against the West Indies after refusing to take the knee. Cricket South Africa issued a directive before the match that all players should make the gesture. In another match, Pakistan beat New Zealand by 5 wickets. The partnership between Shoaib Malik and Asif Ali guided Pakistan to the second men's T20 World Cup victory in 3 days. Chasing 135, Shoaib and Asif shared 48 to seal success with 8 balls left. New Zealand, playing their first game in Group 2, were restricted to 134 for 8, with Haris Rauf taking 4 for 22. In the T20 World Cup today, England will face Bangladesh. Buoyed by an emphatic win over defending champions the West Indies, England will look to continue their winning momentum when they face Bangladesh in a tricky Super 12 clash. In another match, Scotland will take on Namibia in the 21st match of the 2021 edition of the T20 World Cup. The Scotland side will enter the match low on confidence after the thrashing it received from the Afghanistan side in their Super 12 match on 25th October 2021. In badminton, Sameer Verma advanced to the second round of the men's singles of the French Open in Paris on Tuesday. Sameer beat South Korea's Lee Dong-kyun 21-14, 21-12 in the opening round. Sameer will next face Indonesia's Cesar Hiren Rustavito. In soccer, Chelsea progressed to the quarterfinals of the EFL Cup as they beat Premier League rivals Southampton on penalties after a 1-all draw. Reece James scored the decisive spot kick for the league leaders after Theo Walcott and Will Smallbone failed to hit the target with their efforts. For the Saints, the Blues have enjoyed a fine start to the campaign both at home and in Europe as they sit top of the Premier League and have won 2 of the 3 games so far in the Champions League. And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of News on the Hour. News and updates continue on DD India, so stay tuned. Namaskar.